Hello and welcome to Everything's Fine, probably your weekly antidote to bad news. This is our 20th episode. Can you believe that, Shelley? 20 episodes.
Oh, what a lovely round number that is.
Isn't it? Who'd have thought? Who'd have thought we keep doing this for 20 weeks? There we are. We're clearly more stubborn than anybody had realised.
We haven't woken up to ourselves in 20 weeks. It's incredible.
No. Not looking like it's going to happen anytime soon, is
Yeah.
So, how are you this week?
I'm good, thank you. I'm good. I'm having a really sneaky little holiday. Yeah, I've come to North Norfolk to see my family, but I decided to get a little place in Cromer, so I'm having a lovely time. I spent today like on the beach and with a really smug look on my face. Yeah, really feeling really pleased with myself. I'm staying apart. Look, if I lift up look, I've got like the tiniest sofa in the universe behind me.
That is a very small sofa, isn't it?
Isn't it?
Can you actually get two people on that sofa?
You could get two normal build people on there.
Have you taken the cats with you?
No, the cats are at my sister's.
So they're having a kind of holiday of their own.
Yeah, I've been having regular cat updates as well about how good they've been. So far they haven't peed anywhere they shouldn't have peed. So I don't think anyway.
Not that she knows of.
Yeah, they're all eating. They're all being good. There's minimal hissing. I think everything is fine. How are you anyway?
Yes, I'm fine, thank you. I'm not on any sort of sneaky holiday. I'm just doing all the things I normally do, working and stuff like that.
How
boring middle-aged life. But I am very excited because the new rugby season is almost upon us, so that'll be good. It's not that long till our trip to the Stoop to take
my first trip to the Stoop.
So that'll be fun. Well, we've got a little bit of a treat this week. We have a wonderful guest for you. We've got Rena Dial, neuroscience coach extraordinaire. So, Rena, thank you for joining us this week. First thing, really, I think I would find beneficial, and probably a number of our listeners would. Tell us a bit more about neuroscience, something we hear about, but what is it?
Oh, lovely. Great question. It's absolutely lovely to be here, Jim. Neuroscience, if I was to just literally give a one-line answer, neuroscience is basically the study of how the brain works. And in fact, I can tell you a little bit of a story that changed the way that we understood how the brain works. And this is way back in 1848, so long, long ago. And there was this young 25-year-old railway construction supervisor called Phineas Gage. And he was basically working on site blasting rock and using something known as a tamping rod, which was about 1 meter. And he was packing explosives in the rock. And then there was a spark. And what happened is that the rod shot up. And it shot up and it entered through his left cheek, behind his left eye, and exited from the top of the skull. Now, that sounds really scary, and it probably was. But what was quite interesting is that Phineas Gage was fine. He lived. In fact, he was conscious even a few minutes after that. And he recovered. And of course, he lost his left eye, but he recovered and he lived for the next decade or so. But something very interesting happened is that people started noticing that while, of course, he lost his left eye, his behavior changed. So he used to be very polite, very reliable, very responsible. He was a good leader. But after this accident, he became unreliable. Profanity became normal part of his language. He was pretty irresponsible. He used to get angry. In fact, his friends started saying he no longer is the Gage that we knew. So that became something very curious for people to understand what's really happening. And when the doctors started studying a little bit more, they realized that when the rod had penetrated its skull, it basically shattered a part of the frontal lobe, which is the prefrontal cortex, which is basically the area behind our forehead. But that part of the brain behind our forehead is the part that is responsible for things like decision making, social behavior. And as you can imagine, because that got impacted, his behavior had changed. So, what they started realizing is that the brain injury had not only impacted the person's abilities to see, obviously, but also seemed to have changed who he was as a person. And this became quite an important case, and it's often cited in neuroscience and psychology and neurology, and we're talking about it today as well. Because what we began to understand at that point of time is the brain shapes the behavior. So, in other words, you and I can say today that if we had to change the behavior of a person, then it has to be a physical change of the brain. And so that's where people started understanding a little bit more about the brain. And a couple of decades ago, there was something known as fMRI that got introduced, which is, if I remember, frequency magnetic resonance imaging. But basically, it's a type of brain scan. And in the brain scan, where they put these little electrodes on your head, and the person is doing certain activities, they can figure out the way the blood flows and which part of the brain really lights up. And so people started understanding more and more about the brain. And what they came to understand is the brain operates with certain rules and principles. It's basically a machine. So the knowledge of understanding how the brain works is neuroscience. Now, when we use that knowledge for, say, medical purposes, or in our case, the work that I do, applied neuroscience for leaders and teams and individuals, is we use that knowledge to be able to really help people solve real-time challenges in their behaviors and also make use of the opportunities so that they can change the quality of life, they can change their behaviors, because then basically what we're doing is we're working with the brain rather than against the brain. And that's what we call applied neuroscience.
I love how it started with a really gruesome accident.
I know, can you imagine? And then we learned so much more.
He was conscious. I don't know if I'd want to be conscious for a while after that, quite honestly. Fabulous. So I know it's considered a fairly young science. As our understanding of how the brain works and how the brain controls behavior is developed, how then does someone like yourself make use of this some really sort of practical ways?
Can I give you a little bit of a backup about how I got into this field, Jim?
Yeah.
Because that'll start answering how I then finally reached to some of the practical answers as well. I was working in the corporate world for about 20 years, and my work was to do basically in human resources. So I was working with leaders as an HR business partner, leadership development, talent. And one of the things that I realized is often when you're working with leaders, these are individuals who are really managing massive P&L accounts, complex challenges. They're doing really good work. Yet there were times that there were certain blind spots that they had when we were doing leadership development programs. And when we tried to reveal that and build up their awareness, there was a sense of defensiveness or self blame, which kind of stopped them from really changing their behaviors. And also, the other thing that I noticed, if I was to reflect on those 20 years, is I noticed that a lot of these leaders, when they were in a room and we were talking about changing behaviors, they understood what we were talking about. And yet it was very difficult for them in real time, especially in high pressure situations, to change the behavior. And so therefore, I got interested in understanding or wanting to understand what really is happening in the brain. Like, why is it that these individuals who are highly accomplished are unable to change behaviors or be able to handle tough situations and get out of their default reactions? So that's kind of got me a little curious of getting into understanding a little bit more about the brain. At that moment of time, I thought I was going to specialize as an executive coach, which is what I did. But I wanted to choose also a methodology that could help me explain something else that I had experienced. So I come from India and I had been there in India for my first 35 years of my life before I came to the UK to do my work. And one of the things I remember I used to always reflect is that I wish Western leaders knew a little bit more about how Indian leaders manage teams and businesses, and vice versa. I wish the Indian leaders knew a little bit more about how methodical the Western leaders can be in managing processes and engaging stakeholders. So I also knew there was an East and a West kind of a match that needed to take place, but I was unable to find a language to express that to people. Because growing up in India, you see a lot of things which stems from the basic ancient science called Ayurveda. I don't know, maybe some of your listeners would have heard about that word. That's where things like yoga, meditation have kind of really sprung out of. And Ayurveda is a Sanskrit word that means science of life. And it's really an ancient science that was there more than 10,000 years ago. And it's all about how the mind body works together. So it was really trying to get that into a language that I could express. And so that kind of got me into the whole study of neuroscience, because it gave me a language then to be able to explain to people and engage individuals with practical ideas about how they can really change behaviors and change their leadership persona if that's what they want to do, especially when they are trying to handle bigger complexes or complex assignments or growing up the ladder. So that's kind of a little bit of a background about how I got into this particular subject. Jim, you
Okay,
need to remind me what was the question.
well, yeah, no, that's, I was like really interested in what you were saying about that, like meditation techniques and how a lot of it's actually very ancient knowledge from India. I thought that was really quite interesting, especially when you think about how we say to do things like lots of people do meditation and yoga now in the West, don't they? And
Yes.
then things like mindfulness and things are
Yes.
those kind of words that you get, encouraged to follow to try and improve your mental health and your mental focus. But yeah, sorry, Jim, that I also got distracted away from what the original question was because I was interested.
It's Rena's fault for being so compelling.
And being distracting. I get it.
For being so interesting.
I hear you.
Yeah, it was really about how we get to ways in which this can offer some real sort of some practical guidance, some practical ways of working. Application, I suppose. That's the word I'm looking for.
Okay, so the first thing with applied neuroscience is to try to understand what's the science or what's the neuroscience of happiness. So if you're up for a little bit of science, I am happy to share that with you, which kind of really brings it to light because it's a topic that we all grapple with, right? But once you understand the science, it's like, that's what's really happening in my brain. So it's quite interesting in that way. So happiness as such, if I just take that one topic, happiness, such a big topic, but let's just try to declutter that a little bit, right? Because happiness means so many things for so many people and different things as well. Happiness is an emotion. I think we will all agree with that. It's an emotion that people experience. But what exactly is emotion from a neuroscience angle? Emotions from a neuroscience angle are basically chemical reactions that the brain is using to categorize and remember how we should interpret what our senses are picking up around us. So there's some things that happen around us that make us feel happy or not feel happy for that matter, right? So think about it from that angle, that they are being stored. So it's not something very fluffy. It's a physiological reaction that's happening in the body. Let me make it even more real for you and your listeners. When we are feeling happy, or what we call, there's something known as the happy hormones that are going through our body. Remember, they're chemical reactions. So there are four that I'm going to tease out. Let's say you are in a situation where you're learning something new. So there's novelty and there's learning that taking place, right? Or that there's a goal that needs to be achieved. It could be a project goal. It could be a birthday party that's you're organizing. It's a goal that you're working towards, right? So there's a certain motivation and drive to get that done. And when we complete that project or that goal, we get a certain feeling, a sense of maybe happiness. That feeling that we are talking of happiness is actually a chemical and hormone that's thrumming through our body called dopamine. So when dopamine gets produced, it's like a motivator. It wants us to do certain things. So when you get that sensation, people should kind of almost realize that that's dopamine in my system that's making me feel so good that I've achieved a particular goal, or this lovely feeling I'm getting because I'm learning something new. So that's one chemical I want to talk about. The other one that we've often heard about is called endorphins. Now, that's something that, again, a lot of people have heard of. And that's actually sometimes known as the natural painkiller. It's something that lifts us. So when we are kind of exercising or having a really good laugh or meditation that we were talking about earlier, or any rhythmic movement, say dance or music that's happening, there's a certain sensation and elation that we feel inside our body. In fact, many times people call it the runner's high as well when people are running. So there's intense exercise and you get that runner's high. So that gives you that sense and you think, oh, I've got such a great feeling. I'm happy. So that's another angle of happiness that people are experiencing, but it's a different chemical that's coming through our body. Then there's something.
That when I stop running.
Yes, see? Yeah. And when you stop running, that's when you feel it because your body has actually felt it and you've also achieved your goal. So can you imagine? It's an endorphin and a dopamine kick that you're getting at that moment of time. That makes you feel so great, right? I wish I could do that because I don't do that much of running, but hey, I can dance and feel happy about that.
I can understand it more in dancing, definitely. That really is fun to dance, definitely.
Isn't it? Isn't it true? And a lot of people, I think so, have that sensing. But it's also to try to make it really real. So this feeling of happiness suddenly becomes a little bit more tangible in understanding what's happening in the body. Because then you start thinking that if I want to be happy, those are the activities I should do, because then those chemicals will get released in my body. And then it'll give me that sense of, oh, I'm feeling great, right? So we've talked about two. There are other two as well. So the other one is really something that we experience when we are connecting with people. So when there's trust and there's bonding, say it's with family members, or you're sitting down with your friends and feeling really safe and spending time with them, or in organizations, there's a team that's working together who trust each other, and so they're feeling quite comfortable. When we are having that feeling of connecting with other individuals and feeling safe and feeling happy, that's oxytocin that's running through our body. It's often known as the love hormone.
Is that also, you get that hormone, I think mothers get it from their babies, don't they? Of holding their babies, that releases oxytocin.
Correct, Shelley. Absolutely. So the body is getting that hormone. So you kind of, the mother's bonding with the child. In fact, not only mothers, even fathers, when children are born, have oxytocin lift in their body, which is how they bond with the child, even though they've not gone through the pregnancy. So they feel that sense of bonding and they feel happy with the child when they're clinging on to their little baby, or the baby is clinging on to them, or they're both clinging on to each other. That's oxytocin, but it's a happy feeling. So again, to think from a practical term is when we are spending time with people that we love to be with, and we're connecting and we're bonding and we have that psychological safety, it's an oxytocin high that we are getting, and that makes us happy as well. And all of these three hormones I've talked about actually get produced in the brain between our ears. And I say that between our ears because I'll come to that in a bit as well. The fourth chemical that's there, which kind of often is used in the whole happiness conversation, is something known as serotonin. And serotonin is actually produced, 90 to 95% of serotonin is actually produced in the gut, in our stomach. And about the rest is actually produced in the brain as well. So you can imagine things like gut health becomes really important, what you eat, because that's where serotonin is being created. And when we have had, when our eating is good, when our digestion is working well, you kind of feel quite happy about it, right? So that's another sense where you have that sense of well-being. You feel more calm. You feel like, I'm feeling good. I've had a nice meal, and probably not the McDonald's. Well, I love McDonald's sometimes, but you know what I mean, if it's not a regular meal.
So, it does give you the McDowns afterwards.
Yes, nicely said there. Nicely said there. So, and even something like serotonin, when we go to sleep in the night, that's the thing that converts to melatonin, which regulates sleep. So, all of these are chemicals that are thrumming through our body that makes us feel happiness. And you can see how there are certain activities that are attached to all of these that makes a person feel happy. So, happiness, which is such sometimes it can be such an amorphous, such a fluffy conversation, suddenly can become quite real in the activities that we can do, which can make us feel a little bit more happier as well. So that's one angle I would take where happiness is concerned, and just adding in a little bit of neuroscience. So when people are feeling these various emotions, it's almost like, okay, I want to get a dopamine hit. What can I do? What can I learn? Where is it that I can go and maybe set down a little goal and have a little milestone and work towards it? That's a dopamine hit a person is going to get. Or let me go and spend time with a loved one. Oh, lovely. That's the oxytocin hit I'm getting. Or maybe I'll just eat some nice food that makes me feel fresh and alive. Get some rest. That's a serotonin that's taking place that makes us feel happy. So it's really kind of bringing that to life in a much more real and practical way. And you can imagine if some of these become lifestyle habits of an individual, then you're constantly getting these chemicals in your body which make us feel happy. So that's one side of the coin. So then what's the other side of the coin? Shall I continue?
Please do.
Yeah.
Definitely. No, I think it's really interesting. I was also just thinking, because you were saying about spending time with like colleagues and friends and things, and I definitely know what you mean when you work on a team and there's certain people who you're really close to and you're not happy when they go on leave.
Yes,
And then you're
absolutely.
really happy when they come back. You definitely get that hit of all of those happiness chemicals. So it's
Yeah.
making sense so far.
Yeah, lovely. So then the question is, what gives us unhappiness? Right? What is it that can then lead to too much of unhappiness, can lead to maybe mental stress, it can impact our mental well being because that's the other side of the coin. So, as human beings, we all need energy to do our things, right? That's obvious. We need energy to wake up in the morning. We need energy to have this conversation. We need energy to listen. We need energy to do work. Everything is energy, right? And the four chemicals that I've talked about right now can be clustered under something known as anabolic energy. Because you can imagine when we get all of that lovely energy spinning through our body, we get motivated to do things, we feel happier, so then we get to do other things. So that's one part of the energy. And think of energy as a spectrum. It isn't, but for a moment, stay with me and think it's a spectrum. So, on one side, we've got this anabolic energy with dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins. On the other side of the spectrum is something known as catabolic energy. When we experience catabolic energy, there are two chemicals thrumming through our body. And that's something that probably all your listeners would have heard about, which is adrenaline and cortisol. And they're often known as stress hormones, which means that when the body feels that it's under stress or under threat, it releases these two hormones because it needs to move very fast and protect itself. And a language that's being used a lot right now is the fight, flight, freeze reaction that individuals have, right? So that's the other chemical that the brain or the human species over evolution has created. And the primary role of those two chemicals and the fight, flight, freeze is to adhere to the first principle of the brain, which is survive. That's the primary job of the brain, is survival of the species. And so when there is any threat it experiences, it releases these two because it's either like fight the threat or run away from the threat or just freeze and hope that the threat just passes over. Probably got evolved at the time of the saber-tooth tiger that was running towards us, and we were either fight or run away or just play dead and hopefully I'm going to be saved. So that's where it happens. But fast forward to today, while there is no saber-tooth tiger, the same mechanics gets created when we have multiple stresses that are hitting us in our day-to-day life. It could be the to-do list that we have to do. It could be the bill that needs to be paid next month. It could be that, oh my gosh, I don't have a job. What do I do? It could be because I'm feeling isolated and lonely. there are so many stress triggers that people are feeling. So actually, all of us are almost in a hyper state of alertness and stress reaction. Because when the fight, flight, freeze kind of reaction takes place, what's quite interesting is it takes place in nanoseconds as an auto reflex reaction. And you and I know that we experience fight, flight, freeze when we have emotions such as, which is the unhappy emotions, if I may call it that, are things like anger, fear, anxiety, irritation, loss of confidence, imposter syndrome, melancholy, sadness. All of these can be categorized under the either the fight or the flight or the freeze, which is what gets that reaction, right? So now we're suddenly understanding the happy and the unhappy emotions and the science behind it. Now, as human beings, we cannot run away. You would think that, all right, so is there a way that I could just switch up the catabolic energy and not have adrenaline and cortisol running through my body and just feel the dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins? But well, it's not that easy. It's not personality led. That's a species level conversation. So, as a species, we must and experience both the energies. That's how the species functions. But it is our gift of how much of the adrenal and cortisol we bring into the body. So, in other words, if I say it in a different way, I might get angry because somebody screamed at me. I might get angry because my value of honesty, for example, that got conflicted. I might be fearful because I might lose my job, but it is my choice whether I want to remain feeling that emotion. So, one of the things we often talk about is feel the emotion, don't be the emotion. So, it is natural as a body reaction for me to get angry about certain things or to get stressed about certain things. That's a physiological response that's taking place. And it happens in nanoseconds before even the mind makes sense of it. But so it's really being able to stop it out. Because again, from a neuroscience angle, if I may just bring in a little bit more, is everything, and I mean everything that you and I experience in life, which our senses pick up, whether the eyes, what we are listening to, what we are saying in the response, or what's happening in the environment, anything that we experience first gets filtered to that part of the brain which is known as the limbic system. And the limbic system, just to make it really real, if your listeners, or if I was to right now make a fist of my hand, think about it. Your wrist and the forearm is the neck and the spinal cord, and the fist is the limbic system. That's exactly how it's situated. And in the limbic system, there are actually two almond-shaped organs, if I may call it, on either side, which is known as the amygdala. And the job of the amygdala is to look at all the filters, that the senses is picking up, and first decide, is this a survival issue or not? Because if it is a threat, it immediately gets alerted and it gives signals down to the adrenal glands, which sit on top of my kidneys, and says, go into a fight, flight, freeze because it's a threat. And it is in so much of nanoseconds, and this again, your listeners will experience it, and I know I've experienced it. Sometimes you get angry at something and you don't even know why you are angry. It's only later on that you say, oh, I'm angry because so and so said something. That's a sheer evidence that the body has reacted even before the brain has made sense of it. So we can't stop that auto reflex reaction, which is why I say that you feel the anger, but it's your choice whether I want to remain angry or not. Because one of the interesting mechanics that happen is when the amygdala gets alerted, is when the limbic system is alerted, it switches off another part of the brain which could help us, which I mentioned at the start with Phineas Gage story, which is the prefrontal cortex, which sits behind the forehead. Now, the prefrontal cortex is the one that decides, it analyzes the problem, is the creative genius of our brain. It's often known as the CEO of the brain because that's the one that really regulates and manages and say, all right, you really shouldn't get angry with this person. You know, the other choices. It switches off. So when I'm in a survival kind of a reaction, I don't have access to it, which is why sometimes, again, to make it real for people, When I'm in a particular situation, I might get angry, but if a friend comes and talks to me about the same situation that she or he are facing, I have so much advice to give them.
Mm.
Because that time I'm not in a survival thing. So I'm like, oh, you can do this, and maybe you can, and maybe you should listen appropriately. But the same thing was to happen to me. No way I have control over it, right? Because my PFCs got shut down. But when someone's coming to advise, my PFC is working and coming up with amazing ideas, right? The so what of this is, if you are feeling any of these emotions, which I call the catabolic emotions, is to be aware of it and to know that it's how your brain is just trying to protect you. All of this is a survival game. So it's feeling a threat of some kind. So one of the techniques that we often use with people is called name it to tame it. Is when you feel an emotion which is catabolic, is to almost be able to name it of saying, oh, I'm feeling angry, oh, I'm feeling sad, oh, I'm feeling a little melancholy, I'm feeling a little anxious. What can I do to protect myself in this particular moment? Because the minute I ask a question, guess which part of the brain lights up? The prefrontal cortex. Because the prefrontal cortex is the one that's responsible for answering questions. The limbic system is just responsible for responding to stimuli. So, asking a question and being curious in the moment is a great way to switch on the PFC so then you have more access or agency. And even being aware of the fact that, oh, this is not me getting angry, it's my brain trying to protect me. This is something which I've seen helps my clients tremendously because it depersonalizes what they're feeling in the moment. It gives them that little bit of a, as they say, your foot in the doorway to then kind of widen and say, what can I do to protect myself? What can I do to feel less angry in the moment? Which is why, coming back to ancient wisdom and science that we talked about earlier, this is why breath work is really amazing. This is why mindfulness is amazing in the moment. Because the minute I do breathing, which is often people say, take 10 deep, long breaths when you're angry, or go drink a glass of water. Because the minute I do that, it calms down my limbic system. It's a physiological reaction that calms it down. And once the limbic system is calmed down, then I can have more choices of how I want to react to that particular situation. But when people are not trained as such to really notice what's happening in their body, and they continue to feel angry or they continue to feel sad, and they're unable to break that circuit that's taking place, it often leads to stress and burnout.
Mm.
And that's
Yeah,
the
I think
problem. That's where mental health starts becoming a problem because they have no access to really breaking that circuit, because anger leads to more angry, and then I haven't dealt with this, so I get more angry and it spirals out, and I'm angry about one thing, but then I'm angry about 10 other things, and I'm just an angry person. And then I'm
that's
really,
very recognizable, isn't it?
yes,
Definitely. I think
absolutely.
everyone could recognize that. That's a very good explanation
You think
of
so?
how that works. That makes perfect sense because I've always thought, yeah, I know that this is cortisol. I know that cortisol is making me feel bad, but actually to link it up, why we get that spike in cortisol, and I'm definitely sure that the CEO of my brain takes some really long sabbaticals sometimes as
It's
well.
all of ours, all of ours.
Yeah, and
All
it's
of
made
ours.
me think of like some really good advice I'd had at work was you don't reply to an email straight away.
Yes,
Sometimes write the email out and don't send it and then leave it and then come back to, or don't write it, just walk away from it, do whatever you need to do. That is giving you that time, isn't it, to calm down and not feel quite so angry anymore.
absolutely. Or sometimes people ask the question of saying, when they're feeling stuck or they are just in that kind of a limbic reaction. My clients call it being limbic actually. So when they're in the limbic reaction, is to sometimes ask myself, what would someone else do in this situation? And it could be somebody who's their role model or their partner or their friend, and like, what would so and so do? I might be like, what would Jim do in this moment? And remember, the minute a question is asked, we have lighted up the PFC, and now we have agency. And so suddenly we think, all right, maybe that's what Jim would do. Maybe I've got more choices. Okay, maybe I'll react differently. And then again, once this becomes a habit, then people learn how to regulate the emotion. And that's, I think, so a big topic that's coming into the whole conversation of mental health right now, is because we are never really taught to recognize, regulate, understand, or channel our emotions. Because, you grow up thinking, oh, women are too emotional, girls are too emotional, boys should not cry, men don't cry. So there's so many labels and baggage associated with emotions. And we are doing ourselves no service because actually the first port of call in our brain is the emotional cortex. So it begs the question, why would we not really understand and really figure out what the emotion is telling us and use it as a source of intelligence and learn how to regulate it with such as some of the examples you shared and I shared, or even plain breath work. It's one of the most scientific and easily accessible activity for us to calm down an agitated brain.
If we were to take 2 or 3 top practical tips from neuroscience of how to lead a more positive and happy life, what would they be?
All right, so let's go like really simple. Remember, we went back to those different lovely serotonin, endorphins, dopamine, oxytocin. So immediately when somebody's thinking about what are the practical things that I can do so that I can be having a lifestyle that is generally generating these amazing chemicals in my body, which I know are going to lead me to feel happy, right? So let's start with that context. So one of the things is from a physical angle is to make sure that you're moving your body. So whether it's dancing in your kitchen or a gym session or whether it's a brisk walk that you're doing, because whenever we do movement, it triggers endorphins that relieve stress and gives us that, I'm feeling good feeling, right? So that's a real practical thing that people can bring into their lives. And over a period of time, when you're doing more and more, you start building up what I call a bank balance of anabolic energy because you're doing more of it. So it's like a reserve that's available to us when we're going through stress time. Another thing that could be there, so we know that dopamine is when we have achieved something. So celebrating small wins. It might be like, what are the 3 little goals that I want to do today? It might be send that email that I haven't sent, or drink 2 liters of water, or maybe not do so much of reduce my social media by half an hour. Every tick of goal that we achieve releases dopamine in the system. And so what we're doing is we're almost training our brain to feel motivated and rewarded and to use more of that chemical within our body. So celebrating small wins on a daily basis is amazing to kind of have that again as a lifestyle habit. Connection, giving someone a hug, calling a friend, simply making an honest eye contact in a conversation. Even brief social bonds trigger oxytocin, which builds that trust and belonging. And that's something that can build up over a period of time if you're doing it on a regular basis. Gratitude. We often hear people talking about gratitude journals. Let's set that aside. Even before we go to bed, if or before the day ends, if we were to just write down or think about what's the one thing that I'm grateful about today. Maybe it was because, I cooked a meal for myself. Or actually, I finished the shopping. Or actually, I said something nice to somebody or I smiled at an individual. What's the one thing that made us grateful about today? Because the minute gratitude comes into our mind, it rewires our brain to notice the positives, especially in a world as we were talking about, which has got only bad news around the world, right? So any good news, anything to be happy about. I'm happy I heard this great news about somebody. I'm happy I didn't pay attention to that negative news. So it really fuels both calm and reward pathways. So that's another way that kind of really helps out. Another very practical tip, which helps, I think, so both in the realms of mental health as well as happiness, is the amount of sleep that we have. We all know that sleep is a major problem at this moment of time. And neuroscience has gone and proven it. In fact, you'll be surprised when I was doing this MIT Sloan course and they had the topmost CEOs who were interviewed, one of the first practices they put into place was their sleep. Is they were making sure they were getting quality sleep, especially when they were, jet setting around the world. So 7 to 8 hours of sleep is something over a period of time that becomes really important because that's when the brain really detoxifies gets all the toxins out of your body. It helps you calm down. And we all know what a good night's rest is like the other day. Or we all know what a bad night's rest does to the next day, right? And so when people make the statement of saying, I often have clients or some people who come and say, oh, you know what, I really don't need to sleep more than 3 or 4 hours a night. I'm like, I don't need that sleep. Maybe for 1 or 2 days, maybe for a month, it's okay. But 5 years down the line, it's going to catch up on you. So really protecting basic patterns like sleep, the amount of water you're drinking. Remember, we're trying to feed the whole brain system. If the body is working well, our whole brain's going to work well as well, right? So those become really practical ways or habits that one can bring into the system. And then in the moment, I think so the practical thing that I talk about that I would repeat is when you're feeling any of those catabolic emotions of anger, stress, all of that thing that we talked about, is just be aware of it, name it and tame it. Like just really call it out. You'll find a difference. Just say, oh, that's what I'm feeling. It's not me, it's my brain. What can I do to protect myself at this moment of time? So some of those I think are ideas that could really help. We've already talked about meditation. I know it's a difficult thing for people at times to do meditation. So I think even if you're not doing meditation, do 5 minutes of breath work in a day. That's all. Or at least take 5 breaths. Take mini breaks where you're just taking 5 breaths. It just calms your system down. So I think what I'm also trying to bring to life in these examples is that to be happy and to be able to regulate your mental health is a whole body experience. It's not a mental game only that one needs to make. If some of these practices come into our lifestyle, we'll generally feel happier and more calmer and be able to address the stresses in our life because we have good anabolic reserves in our body.
That's really good. I know when I did yoga, my yoga teacher used to say sometimes when you're at work, just stop and you don't have to do yoga every day, but at least actually just sometimes stop and stand properly.
Yes.
The stance you have to do when you're standing upright in a yoga class. And it's the first time, because actually for most of the day, we're actually slumped over, aren't we? We're hunched over a desk. Actually, if you just stand up and hold yourself properly, your shoulders down, your feet hip width apart, and breathe for a moment, that's actually giving your body just a mini little rest, a very small little break in the day.
Very well said. Absolutely. All yoga positions are meant to allow the body to breathe properly, the postures. And it also almost kind of makes the body a little bit more elastic in a way. So you can imagine your nerves are now working more, the clogs are out. Though, of course, it doesn't happen in the first session. I remember the first session I ever did in yoga after a long time, and my teacher was like, okay, bend and take that posture and engage your leg muscle. I was like, what leg muscle? I cannot engage anything. But then with practice, we do, right? So then over a period of time, we learn how to do that.
Yeah, I know that, just not to take it too far at work, because I think if I'd started doing downward facing dog in the office,
Might
some
not be a
people
good
could be really
idea.
quite upset, I think.
Yes. I'd stick to the breath work. I'd stick to the breath work, Shelley. Absolutely. I would.
Brilliant. Look, really, thank you so much for your time tonight. It's been, I found it absolutely fascinating. And there's some really interesting practical things that I think we can all do, hopefully, to just lead a happier and healthier life if we just follow some good tips.
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure.
Where can people go to find out more about you and what you do, Rena?
I think the easiest way is to perhaps go to my website, which is reenadayal.com, and get to know a little bit more of what I do, which is neuroscience based work on personal and professional development, especially with leaders. LinkedIn, another great place to connect with me. And if nothing else, drop me a line at hello@reenadayal.com.
Fantastic. Rena, thank you again for a really fascinating conversation. Thoroughly enjoyed that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. It has been an absolute joy for me, and I wish you too and your listener happy times.
Lovely to meet you, Rena.
Likewise.
That was really interesting, I have to
wasn't it?
say. I've realized how many of my emails that I've been answering with my amygdala and my adrenal glands. Sorry, everyone.
Well, at least you know who to blame now.
Yeah, it was
Not me, it's my adrenal glands.
I knew not what I was doing.
Put them to disciplinary hearing, not me. No, I mean, really interesting. Lots of stuff covered tonight. Goodness knows how you're going to top that next week. Because next week, Shelley and
Wow.
Stu are in charge.
Yeah, but both Stu and I both think that we are the biggest experts in the room. So it's going to be interesting.
Yeah,
It's
with
going to be
no referee.
clash of the egos.
And then I'll have the fun of taking all that footage and trying to edit
Yeah.
it into a show. So if next week is a bit short, we'll see. No, I'm sure it'll be fabulous. So next week we will be back. Well, they will be back with lots of wonderful good news. Stu will be back. And we will see you. Well, we won't see you. You won't see us, but you'll hear us then. In the meantime, if you've enjoyed this, please tell all your friends, even tell people you don't like all that much. If you want to tell anyone you know, like, share, subscribe, all of that wonderful things. Take some of those marvelous tips from Rena on board. Be happy, be healthy, and remember,